Welcome back to the And Both podcast. My guest this week is Katie Kristofic. She's the founder of the Carefullist. It's a platform and community designed to support family caregivers. Katie created it after her own experience caring for her mom, who passed away from Alzheimer's disease, and the journey that she went on throughout that caregiving process of figuring out all of the resources and walking through the steps that often don't get talked about when it comes to family caregiving, because it's something that's sort of done behind the scenes. So she took all of this information that she gathered in her experience in terms of being able to find resources and being able to connect with companies and services, and created this Carefullist and also the Carefullist podcast, where she hosts conversations around care. And I was fortunate to be a guest on the show, so you can also catch that episode. But she has more than 20 years of experience in marketing communications, including leadership roles in pharma and biotech, and specialized in strategic marketing, PR, and crisis communication. She's got a bachelor's in communication studies and corporate communication certification, both from Cornell. So in the conversation, we talk a lot about what it means to care for others and what that demand looks like for the individual, long-term planning, what that really looks like, the nuts and bolts of it, because that is something that we often have in a big bucket, but not necessarily get into the nitty-gritty of it, and how she's building something to make the process less overwhelming for the caregivers that are coming in behind her. So I really hope you enjoy this, and you can find all of the links to her resources in the show notes. Hello, and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the And Both podcast. I am here today with Katie Kristofic. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to talk to you today.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm really excited to have this conversation for a couple of reasons. But before we get started, tell people what you want them to know about you.
Sure. I am a wife and mother. I am a business owner, and I am a daughter of someone who had Alzheimer's disease, and that has informed a lot of what I do now.
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, yeah, what you're doing is pretty incredible. So how about we start there? If you want to let people know what you're building, what you've built and what you're building and where that's all going, because I think it's fascinating.
Sure. Thanks for asking about that. I am building a company called the Carefullist, and the purpose of it is to support family caregivers, people who are providing long-term care to their loved ones at home, whether it be dementia, Parkinson's, MS, ALS, children with special needs or medical complexity, things like that. When we were caring for my mom, I lived a couple of hours away, and my dad and my sister were her primary caregivers who lived close by. And I did not want to be the person who, I live far away, so I don't have to help. I wanted to figure out what I could do. And I basically treated it sort of like a remote job. I can book appointments. What else can I do on my computer? I can find local resources to come and shovel snow, to come and help clean the house, stuff like that. What I did not count on was how long it took to find those resources and how difficult it was to be able to get what I wanted, gauge if it was the right thing. And so that's really what led to the creation of the Carefullist. I kept thinking, there has to be something out here for caregivers that makes this not take so long. And there wasn't. And over time, I had this idea, gosh, 6, 7 years ago now. And over time, I kept thinking somebody's going to do it. I didn't go to Harvard. I don't live in the Silicon Valley. Like, that's not me. That's not what I do. But the fact of the matter is, nobody did it. And the need just continues to grow. So I thought, okay, well, I have spent over 20 years in the marketing communications space in pharma and biotech. So I know enough to be dangerous.
Yes. I love that. I love that phrase so much.
How can I put this together so that it is not as difficult for other people as it was for us? And so the website is in its second iteration and launching a new version that I'm really, really, really excited about in April. It has a
Yay.
much improved user experience, and it's more the vision that I've wanted from the beginning. But again, the knowing enough to be dangerous thing, like I cobbled together what I could on Wix, but it needed a lot of help.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I found some folks who were able to deliver on the vision that I have for it in terms of making it easy to find stuff and streamlining the experience. So,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I just think like the experience of this was terrible for me. And now I know that I'm not the only one. I think I could talk about this until I'm blue in the face, but caregiving is so undersupported because it is so undervalued. And the problem that we're, running a million miles an hour towards is our country is aging rapidly. 10,000 people a day turn 65, and they have been since 2010. And there's still 5 more years of that. And families are smaller. Families are spread out more, like your experience. And so there's less people to do an increasing amount of work because it's not like, I can wish on a shooting star all I want, but like the American healthcare system is not going to get fixed overnight. And so all of those gaps in care are filled by family caregivers.
Right. Yeah.
And
53 million of them. It's not a small number.
No, it is not a small number. The care ratio is 7-1 right now. So 7 caregivers per 1 recipient. And in the next 10 years, it's going to go down to 4-1. So it's half. When 2030, 1 in 5 in this country is going to be over the age of 65. People live longer. They live with chronic health conditions. They live with more complex medical needs. They live with the inability to access the resources. The days of like, well, mom's just going to have to go here it's not going to be the same. In 15 years, that's not going to be the same.
Right.
Right now it costs so much money, $10,000 a month to go to the facility that's kind of not in my neighborhood, but it's down the road, $10,000 a month. And it's more if you need memory care.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just not attainable.
No, it's not. And the dream of, well, we bought a house, and so that's going to cover our care, and it's also going to be inheritance for our children. Well, if you sell your house for $300,000, it'll buy you a few years of care, but most people are going to outlive the care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can kiss that leaving money to your kids thing goodbye. And it's a huge shift in the way we were raised. And that was just sort of the expectation, was that there would be an inheritance if you owned a home. And it is now the primary way that people finance their care, but they run out of money much, much quicker than they expect.
Yeah. And I think it should be printed everywhere, but it's not. It should be like the cigarette packaging of healthcare is that Medicare has a 5-year look back.
Yes.
So it's not talked about enough. I didn't know about this until I worked in a hospital. Medicare will look back 5 years. So if 4 years ago you signed your house over to your kids, because you were thinking like, I'm going to give this to them and then I'll go on Medicare and that will
Mhm.
cover my costs. You won't qualify, and then
Right.
you don't have anything. So it's this rise of helping with planning for long-term care and what that's all going to look like. There are companies now that are popping up because people are getting stuck in that. So people, instead of doing giving the house or signing it over or whatever, however they do that succession piece, they're
Mhm.
reverse mortgaging their paid off houses.
Yes.
And it's just the feeling that, you've worked so hard for decades and decades to be able to buy a house and be able to pay off this house and have this thing that now all of a sudden everything can really go up in smoke pretty quickly it's so scary.
Yeah. And one of the best pieces of advice I can give to the people who are listening is to find a financial planner who specializes in long-term care. So long-term care planning, there are people who offer it, and then there are people who really know what they're doing with it. So if you can do that now, if you're in your 30s, 40s, early 50s, that really helps, because then you have a nest egg that is separate from that Medicare 5-year look back thing. For folks who have kind of missed the boat on that, my advice is you should still talk to a financial planner and they can help you figure out, maybe what you can do. But unfortunately, for most people, if you haven't considered that 5-year look back, you're
Yeah.
kind of up the creek. There isn't
Yeah.
really a fallback plan.
I know. And they don't, people don't know. I mean, I don't even know how many people find out about it when they're, a loved one's in the hospital or something happens and they're like, well, we've got to get them signed up for this.
Hmm.
And then you realize, oh my gosh, all of these steps are out of order, but nobody tells you what the order is.
Right.
It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
The system is designed for you to fail.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
especially if you're navigating it for a long time.
mhm.
So so the Carefullist came about from that experience. And is that you had mentioned the sandwich generation.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. I
Yeah.
mean, tell other people more about that and your experience.
Yeah. So, for folks who don't know what sandwich generation is, it is a person who is caring for people who are older than themselves and for people who are younger than themselves. I expand the definition a little bit because there are people who may not have kids, but they're taking care of parents and grandparents. So, it's like the idea of multi-generational
Mhm.
caregiving. So I was a club sandwich generation caregiver in the very beginning. In my early 30s, I had two small children. I had a toddler and a newborn, and my mom had dementia, and my great aunt also had dementia. And my great aunt did not have kids. She and my mom were very, very close. So my mom was like her daughter. And my mom had provided her care, that she needed minimal care, but had been her person. And my mom actually developed dementia first. And so, being the person for my great aunt, my dad really stepped in there. He stepped in all the places, really. And then so I kind of moved into my mom's role of, okay, well, this is how she was helping her and this is what she was doing. So I'm going to do this. And then as things progressed, one of the stories that I think about a lot that really encapsulates the sandwich generation for me is I was working full time in an office because this was pre-COVID, people did that.
Way back when.
Way back when, in the olden days.
BC is really before COVID.
Right. Yeah. That's right. So before COVID, I was in an office and I would take lunch breaks. And I definitely use that, with a hint of very, very deep sarcasm, was not a break. I would make these panic runs over lunch. There were stores that were close to one another. My kids were growing. and the ladies with dementia were losing weight. So I would run into like Carter's, Oshkosh, whatever, and get my kids the clothes they needed because they were growing. And then I would run across the street to Kohl's or Boscov's or Macy's or whatever and get clothes for the ladies who were dropping weight. And then I would have these shopping bags in my car, and then I would run back to the office and, pick something to eat on the way real quick and eat at my desk. And one of my coworkers one time was like, "You were gone for the lunch break, but you're eating at your desk. Like, what's the story?" I was like, "Oh, the story is so long."
The story is, I'm going to finish this sandwich first.
Right. Yeah. The story is, please just let me eat.
Yeah. My head is down. I am trying to breathe and eat at the same time, and
Wow.
talking is not part of
Yeah.
the menu right now.
Like, why will no one let me eat?
Oh my gosh, it has to be funny sometimes or just cry because it's
Well,
true.
that's exactly it. So not to skip around too much, but my sister and I have always had a very similar sense of humor, and we can go dark. And my husband has a dark sense of humor as well. It's very helpful. When I was trying to think of names for my podcast, I was like, well, I want it to be something that's obviously caregiving and associated to the Carefullist brand and whatever. And I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan, speaking of humor. And Spaceballs is one of my most favorite movies. And I was like, oh, I'm totally going to call it Carefullist the podcast. Spaceballs the lunchbox, Spaceballs the dog.
Your branding is amazing.
Thank you. But it really gets to the crux of life gets so difficult and so heavy. And if you can't laugh at pretty much every step of the way, it is so much harder. And, sometimes there's just stuff that's not funny, but then something funny will happen.
Yeah.
And I am very much of the mindset that when the funny happens, you just go with it and you embrace it because it's like a little moment from the universe saying, okay, you can do this. It's not so terrible.
Right. Inhale, exhale, drop your shoulders 14 inches and
Right.
So how long did your mom have dementia for? Like how long were you guys doing the sandwich
Yeah.
caregiving and then you're a club sandwich. So how did you go from club to sandwich? Cuz it's years, right?
Yeah. It's years. Yeah. So it's a convoluted timeline, and I will try to make it clear. Let's say probably around 2010-ish, I started noticing some things with my mom. While we didn't live close by, I talked to her almost every day on my commute home from work. And it was to touch base, of course, but she was also taking care of my nieces and nephews. And so I would love to hear about I didn't have kids yet. So I was like, oh, what are they doing? How was your day? Tell me the funny stories and all of that kind of stuff. And she started repeating herself. And part of it was like, oh, well, okay, I'm calling every day. Maybe she doesn't have that much to talk about. And then she started asking me some of the same questions. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a lot going on. I'm not going to let my brain go there, even though I had a close colleague whose mom had dementia, and she was sharing a lot of the stories and their experience. And I was starting to notice some trends. And I was like, oh man, I'm really afraid this might be the road that we're on. It wasn't until I was pregnant. So my daughter was born in 2010. My son was born in 2013. So I was pregnant with my son, and she wanted to buy some things for him, and she wanted to know what we needed because, subsequent kids, you don't need all the things, you just need some of the things. And she had gotten these really great burp cloths. They were super soft and they were really absorbent. That's the key. Like the cute ones. I didn't need more of the cute ones. I needed the ones that worked.
Yeah, you need the the hefty trash bag of
Right.
burp cloths. Yes. No doilies.
Right. I was like, nothing cute. Just give me the super soaker absorbent things. So I told her, I was like, the ones that you got were great. The shape of them, the whole thing. She had no idea what I was talking about.
Mm.
And it was only a couple of years prior. And she always really prided herself in finding just the right thing. So there's no way she wouldn't have known what I was talking about in any other circumstance. And that's sort of when I was like, okay, I have to watch this a lot closer. I said something to my siblings. I was like, are you noticing anything? This is a concern. And so when my son was born, I had a planned C-section. My daughter was an unplanned C-section, which led to the needing to have a C-section the second time. My husband had just started a new job and only had a couple of weeks off. So he had to go back to work before I could drive and all of that jazz. So my parents came to stay with us. And it was a couple of weeks before Christmas. And we had our Christmas tree up. And my mom was a really good cook. Like whenever anybody had a baby, she would show up with freezer meals and she would do laundry and whatever. They showed up empty-handed, which was my first big, like, what's going on? And, as the kid, I'm like, oh, your stove broke. You'll go to the grocery store and make stuff here.
Like, I have a wound. I cannot.
I was not absolutely counting on you doing the meals this week. That wasn't me just going, please come and take care of me. So yeah, that didn't happen. And then she wanted to do laundry and I explained how to use our washing machine multiple times, which I would never have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. I wrote out the instructions and she couldn't follow the written instructions. And then every day she would just kind of disappear. And I would find her staring at our Christmas tree. And not just for like short periods of time. It was like 45 minutes. And she would talk to me about the same cluster of ornaments. And she did it like 4 days in a row. And so they left and I called my siblings and I said, you guys need to find other childcare.
Yeah.
Like this dad's been covering for her and it's just too much responsibility. So you asked about how all of this transpired in the scheme of the club sandwich and sandwich generation. So I realized she had dementia. We had suspected my great aunt was starting to have some problems. Of course, she was much older. My mom was in her early to mid 60s. My great aunt was in her 80s. And so the first thing was to move my great aunt from her apartment to an assisted living facility. So it was basically an apartment within a facility so that if she had a problem, there was a button she could push and people would be right there kind of thing. And it was great. They had the whole shebang available. So you could make your own meals in your apartment, or you could go to the dining room and eat with other people and be social. We quickly realized with that transition from moving to where she was very familiar to a new place, she had been able to compensate from long-term memory to function by herself. So moving to that new place and taking her out of a familiar environment, she could not adapt. And so she was only in the apartment piece for a couple of months before we had to move her over to the memory care unit. And I don't know, I'm not a doctor, disclaimer, but my observation with family members and friends and people that I've spoken to is the folks who develop dementia older, much older, it moves quicker for them. Not always, but in our experience, that's what happened. Like you take them out of a familiar setting,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, off a cliff. So she had dementia in the memory care facility for, a year, maybe a little bit less, and she passed away. So the club sandwich generation thing ended in 2017. So I had a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time. So one of the most poignant memories I have of the club sandwich thing was in the spring. My daughter was about 5 years old. And I was going to visit, and my dad had my great aunt at the house, and my mom was there, of course. And I was trying to think of an activity that they could all do together. Like, what is something that, other than just sitting around and talking, because I have a 5-year-old who needs to do things, what can we do? So I found those like break apart sugar cookies that have the little patterns printed on them for the holidays and for springtime and whatever. So I got like bunny rabbit and chick break apart cookies, and I put the cookie trays in front of them. And I showed them each, I did a row on each tray, and they just had to make their own row. And they had the best time sitting around the kitchen table and doing that. They could all do it. And then the house smelled good because they all made something together, but I didn't have to worry about ingredients or any of that stuff. It was just there. And I snapped a really quick picture of it. And it's one of my most favorite pictures because they're all there together. They're talking, they're having a good time. And yet, all these years later, I showed it to my daughter, and she has no memory of that day because she was little.
Yeah.
And so out of 4 generations of people, I'm the only one who knows that happened.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's club sandwich.
Yeah, that is a dump truck of like, yeah,
Yeah.
that, I mean, I also want to point out real quick, I think that you might be a closet OT because just the changing around of the environment and the activity demands. I mean, we can get really clinical, but like solid work there.
Thanks.
Yeah. And stickers or badges or something like that. But I think, yeah, to speak to the experience of people that develop dementia older, I think that what happens is that when people are in their own environment, they can do a lot. And I have seen that, when I was an inpatient therapist where someone usually falls and then they go to the hospital and they've been in the hospital for maybe a week or 2, and then they come into rehab, and so now they've moved twice.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is familiar, nobody looks familiar, and then all of a sudden cognitively people are like, what were the scores that this person got in the emergency room? Because this is not the same person that's here, and it's so much context cushioning is gone.
Right.
And then you start to see that the problem solving and the ability to follow the directions and the steps and figuring out where things are, like how, it's amazing how much muscle memory we have of our daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like, if your aunt lived in that apartment for ever and ever.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah. It's like my grandmother had glaucoma, cataracts, and macular degeneration.
Oh,
safe to say she was blind. And she lived alone for years because she counted the steps when she could see. She didn't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Very stubborn woman. She counted the steps to get from place to place in her house.
Yeah.
And so when, people were like, well, she can't see, like her vision is gone. She was like, it's 7 steps down the stairs to this. And then it's 12. She had all of that memorized, and she did fall, and she went into the hospital, and that was there's a big gap there in terms of function because you don't know where the handrail is anymore, and you don't know where all of these other pieces are. So it's the context that people live in is so important for them to be able to stay as functional as possible. So yeah, no, I think it does appear to go really quickly because there's no barriers anymore, or there's no bubble wrap.
Right, exactly. You can see, and I think that's another thing that's key for people who are maybe worried about that as they get older. You can play all the games you want on your phone, but if you are not challenging yourself to get out of your house and go to different places and make that part of your brain work, it's just going to get harder.
Yeah. And people they do tend to, cocoon themselves, right? It's like, I got lost on the way home from the grocery store that one time, and that was really scary, so I'm not going to do that. or, you really start to select your activities and make the world around you very, very small.
Right.
So the question was, when your mom, I know, when your mom was, now all of these pieces are sort of coming together and everyone has this awareness, or it's no longer being shrugged off, or like oh,
Right.
maybe she's just not feeling great. How
Mhm.
did that conversation go in your family?
Mm. So let's see. I am a pattern noticer. I'm sure that is the technical term. I always have been. So I tuned into it first. And I say that loosely because my dad, I'm sure, knew that he was covering and noticing things, but it's a generational thing. Pennsylvania Dutch, Germans keep things very, very close to the vest. Like we don't share feelings, especially.
That you
So
have to laugh,
yeah, I mean, what else are you gonna do?
right?
I'm sure he knew. I don't want to say he didn't know. I mean, I'm sure he knew, but I think he was protecting her, and I think he was protecting us. He's a dad. He didn't want us to worry or realize that this is the road we're on, because she was young and otherwise very healthy. So it was going to be a long haul. So I said something to my siblings, and we talked about it, and it was probably another year before she went and actually got a diagnosis.
Mm.
And that's the other thing, depending where you live. And even still, I mean, this was back in 2015. So we're talking 10 years ago. But even still, depending where you live, getting a dementia diagnosis is really difficult. Healthcare professionals don't want to make that diagnosis.
Mhm.
It's an uncomfortable, horrible conversation because there's really not much they can do for you. And my experience is that most healthcare professionals are not trained to deal with people who have dementia. So we got the diagnosis. They immediately took her driver's license because in Pennsylvania, it's one of the states that does that. Believe it or not, there are only 9. Most
That
states leave it to the family to have to figure out how to take someone's driver's license away, which is a really terrible place to be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so much to be said for. So I had a private practice for a little while that was talking about, I met with families in their homes to try and help them set up for aging in place, right? So family
Mhm.
member. 80% of the work that I did in that role was facilitating these conversations. That's why I ask about, how did it go with your family? Because it
Yeah.
either goes one of two ways, right? It goes like everyone's kind of circling around this, but no one really wants to talk about it. They don't want to be the first one to like
Mhm.
throw that word out or whatever.
Yeah.
Or we aren't talking about any of this. You're trying to take away the keys and the everything.
Mhm.
And so it's the having those conversations and how they kick off and how that happens. But that just sets 41 states are setting families up for, I'm not gonna ask for help. I'm not gonna say that I don't feel like myself. I'm not gonna say I think that this might be, because I'm sure your mom had some awareness of this. And in those 41
Yeah.
states, people are keeping that to themselves because they don't want to lose their license. They want to be
Right.
able to drive a car. They're like, sometimes it's not that bad, or I'm fine, and it gets attributed to other things. And so you're setting the people up that want to help and do the right thing for this battle that is just, it's unnecessary.
It's absolutely unnecessary. And I mean, thankfully, by that point, she already hadn't driven for over a year. And it's not like she wouldn't or she wasn't going to, but if they were going somewhere, my dad would be like, he would just grab the keys and get in the driver's seat, kind of thing. So it was traumatic because they cut her driver's license up right in front of her.
Oh,
But when someone has very little short term memory, doing something like that it stuck with her. She remembered that they did that and that she shouldn't drive. So, am I sorry that it happened that way? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kid who lives a couple of states away, I was very relieved to know that she wouldn't be driving. It was very clear to her she's not allowed to drive. My mom was always a rule follower. So, that worked for her.
Yeah.
I was reading Being Mortal by Atul Gawande.
Mm-hmm.
There is a statistic that he shares in that book that says people over the age of 85 are 3 times as likely to cause or be in an accident as a new teenage driver.
Yeah.
So, and he was just talking people in general. That was not with dementia or anything else. I'm sure the number is much higher if you add all of those things in. And I know the driving conversation is a difficult one to have, but at the same time, it is so necessary because not only can your loved one get lost or, any of those things, certainly they could hurt themselves. They could also hurt somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those has to happen. There's no real way to do it in a way that is going to stick.
Mm-hmm.
So when your mom is not driving and people are noticing these patterns and things like that, how old are your kids?
Everybody had little kids. We all had small children. So 2015, my daughter was 4 and my son was 1. So that means 2 of my other nieces were also 4 because my sister and my brother and I all had a child in the same year.
It's awesome.
They're thick as thieves. And so my oldest niece at the time would have been about 7. And my nephew would have been 2.5. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there wasn't a kid in 2nd grade and above. Everybody was 7 and under when she was diagnosed.
And so you guys are in the thick of it, right? A 1-year-old is not they're not making their own sandwich. You guys are in. You are heads down in one direction, mm-hmm. and then having to juggle it that way. How was that for you?
I did not have the patience that everyone deserved across the board. My kids too, everywhere I turned was some sort of frustration because no one was self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
So it was frustration in the beginning, especially with the sleep deprivation of having a really little kid. Once sleep started to return, things got easier. And I started to see with more clarity that as my kids were learning and becoming more self-sufficient, my mom and my aunt were going the other direction and they were losing abilities. And so that cookie moment was sort of a sweet spot where almost everyone was on the same playing field. And I didn't have to think about different activity levels or different levels of how do you need me to help you? It was like different lesson plans or different care plans for each person. So that sweet spot was really helpful for a while. And then as my kids continued to grow and learn and become more independent, and my mom became less independent and my great aunt passed, the kids were old enough to start to put things together. They call my mom Gaga. Gaga needs help. I can help her do that. So kids are helpers. They like to do things. So if she needed help with, I don't know, whatever, putting on a shoe or reaching down to get something, or they would love to go and be the one to help because they can do it. So I started trying to think of things like what can they help with that gives them some interaction with her and gives her interaction with them. One of the challenges for us was that my mom lost her ability to speak really early.
Wow. Okay.
So, I want to say she passed away in 2023. And she lost her ability to speak a solid 4 years before she passed. So,
Wow.
yeah, like 2019-ish was about the last time she really said much of anything. So that's one of the conversations I've had with especially my son, who is the youngest of all 6 of her grandchildren. He has no memory of having a conversation with her or what her voice sounds like.
Yeah.
So like he'll see her on a video because he asks to watch them, and then he'll say, "Oh, that's right. That's what her voice sounds like." But he can't recall it, and he doesn't have his own particular memory of it. So that's the kind of stuff that's really crappy. And
Yeah.
I can find humor in most things. There's not a thing that I can find funny about that. That
Yeah.
just sucks.
That is just a black hole. So when all of this is going on, right? You're couple states away, and you're probably going back and forth. I'm guessing, like
Yep.
to be there and not be there and stuff like that. The I love the idea of the Carefullist for many many reasons. But was there like a thing that tipped this off? Like you said, this is the thing that you wish you had or whatever. But was there a moment in time where you were like, okay, I have all these resources. How can I, like, when did you come up with the idea? You said earlier that you had this idea for the webpage and what you wanted the user experience to be like. When did
Mhm.
that happen?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that for a while. So let's see. I had originally an idea that I was going to do a blog because I was writing. I am a writer. It's how I express myself. I was writing Facebook posts, and people were reading them, and that was great. But it was really just for me to process what was going on and sort of document what this experience was like,
Mm.
and really to educate people about Alzheimer's. Because, at 32 years old, anybody my age, if they knew somebody with Alzheimer's, it was a grandparent or something. It was certainly not a parent. And so other sandwich generation caregivers are typically like in their 50s with kids in college and whatever. So I really didn't have any peer group that I knew. Now, of course, later, they're everywhere. We just don't talk to one another.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Because everyone's
but
head down.
yeah, exactly. You're just in survival mode.
Mm.
But so I was processing all of it, and I thought it was going to be a blog at first. And that was like 2019. And then I didn't do it. And during COVID, I was a communications person for a pharmaceutical ingredients company. And quickly, when everything shut down, I was no longer doing promotional stuff and whatever. I became like the internal crisis communications person because it was a global enterprise and we had facilities all over the world. And we needed to make sure that everyone was getting timely, accurate, safe information. So, how do we keep our operations going? Because we supply ingredients that go into critical medicines that people need. So, we still have to have people coming to the manufacturing facilities and all of that. And then we have all of the people who have office jobs who are working from home and educating their kids, and people who are, near retirement. So, they don't have anybody else in their house. Either they're living by themselves or whatever. Long story short, too late. I started cultivating a community to try to keep people engaged and make them not feel so disconnected, and also providing information that they could trust and that they knew was the accurate information to keep them safe and make healthy choices for their family.
Hmm.
And so going through that process, I thought, huh, that was like the big light bulb moment for me. I didn't know how to do it. I just kind of did it out of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly this blog thing that I had in the background faded away a little bit and morphed into this, well, I have all of these resources And it would be cool if somebody did it, but nobody has. And now I've cobbled together this community. So I sort of have an idea of maybe where to start to create this site. And so 2023, I call it my year of 2 pushes and a shove. So I was working for a startup. I had left the pharma ingredients company and was working for a startup in the biotech space. And a major investor pulled out and they didn't find somebody to backfill the investment. So January 3rd, my first day back from the holidays, first meeting on the calendar was, yeah, we're really sorry, but we have to cut 60% of the staff. So no severance, nothing. I was just out of a job. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a great start to 2023. So
Happy New Year.
Yeah, right. So I was looking for a job and I talked to my husband and I said, nobody's done this yet. I can't believe nobody's done this yet. What do you think if I just spend the money to reserve a domain name? Just, get the URL. And if I never use it, I never use it, whatever.
Famous last words.
Right? So I got the URL and amid, binge watching a show and feeling sorry for myself, looking for a job because I needed to work. I started another job in April. And so Carefullist was just a URL. And that job went until September. My mom died September 6th of 2023. That was my second push. And 3 weeks later, I got laid off from the agency where I was working. And that was the shove. It was like, okay, I've lost. Corporate America has said no, thank you to me twice. 1 year.
Like a kick in the back of the head. That is not a shove. There's nothing delicate about that procedure. Oh my God.
So October, I was like, well, I have a lot of free time. My mom's not here and I don't have a job. So that's where the sense of humor comes in handy because, I could have gone real dark real fast. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. There were days where, like, if I didn't have kids, I probably wouldn't have gotten out of bed. But I did have kids and I did get out of bed. And I was left with this deep sense of, okay, no one has done this. I know enough to be dangerous. Let's see what I can do with it. A really good friend of mine that I grew up with, she was my very first best friend back in first grade. We've, thanks to the wonders of social media, stayed in touch. She runs a really great program called Unstuck. Her name is Janine Ritson. Sorry, shameless plug.
No shame. Just plug it. Plug it in there.
If you have a project that you can't seem to get past, but you really want to work on it, I was in one of her early groups to help her kind of figure out how she wanted to run these programs. And it is what led to me figuring out how I wanted to structure the site and realizing that that was a much longer term project. And so I needed to launch my social channels first. So that's what I did, is like a quick win kind of thing to really invest. And I will tell you that it was one of the scariest things ever, was making those social channels go live. Like, I'm announcing publicly that this is what I'm doing. So I am now either going to succeed publicly or fail publicly.
Yep. It's like someone opened the door in the dressing room and you're like, didn't even have my pants all the way on yet, but thank you so much.
Right. Yeah.
My kids have never done that to me. We were like, hello, everyone. Hello, everyone in the store. This is me.
Right.
Well, I don't try stuff on anymore.
Yeah. No. Or you just, yeah. I was going to say you don't take them with you, but who's going to watch them? You have to take them along.
So throughout this whole experience, and not experience, but throughout this journey of that, like, what were the things that you kept for you? Because, and I don't want to be so presumptuous as to say, like, I'm sure you had a 30-minute meditation and like this and this, right? Like, I'm talking, this is the day I drank my cup of coffee before it was ice cold, or this is the day I went and I stood outside and I screamed at the world or whatever. But like, what were there things along that? Because you did this for a long time
Yeah.
and you're still doing this. I mean, your kids are they're still at home.
Yeah.
And you're building a business now. And, it's sort of that energy from caregiving can be energy that goes into the business, stuff like that. But you're still putting a lot of that stuff out there. So what are the things that you do for you?
Yeah. So during the process of my mom's journey, writing those Facebook posts was something that I did for me. It really helped me to process what was happening, how I felt about it. I did not sugarcoat anything in those posts. It was very raw, and it was not public. I mean, it was just to family and friends. But that was for me. An uglier side of it was that more often than not, I cried in the shower because, you go outside and scream in a neighborhood, eventually somebody's going to call the cops.
And I'll just have my tears get washed down the drain.
Right.
And
the water helps to keep the puffiness at bay. So there was that. And for me, music. I really process things by listening to favorite music, favorite artists, and things like that. I did not have gray hair at the start of this process. I have a fair amount now. So, I mean, it changes you for sure. In I would say caregiving changes you in the way that becoming a parent changes you. You just have this new ability to see and appreciate humanity for what it is.
You also run into, nobody gets out of life alive. And how do you navigate that?
And I would say that's been one of the biggest gifts, really. Like, would I have taken this chance 5 years ago? No.
Yeah.
I was too scared. But like 2023, two of the worst things that I could imagine happening to me happened to me. One of them twice. So we'll call that rock bottom.
Like, message received. All right. Message received. That's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, please stop. I'm done now. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? It's like when you have the worst stuff happen.
Yeah.
It sort of takes the sharp edges off of the stuff that doesn't approximate that category in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So what now? You have a wonderful podcast and you have this growing business and you have the new website coming out. Like where do you see all this going?
My dream is that somebody somewhere in America at 2:00 in the morning who is trying to answer a question that they have finds it easily in one place and they can go back to bed. I want caregivers to have more time for themselves, to do with that time what they want and need to do, whether they get more rest, whether they have a quality conversation with their loved one rather than a transactional care conversation, because those are very different. However they want to spend the time. The average caregiver spends at least 13 hours a month on research for their person.
Yeah.
13 hours. I mean, that's a couple hours a week that you could do anything else.
And you also, we were talking about this week, I was talking with other people that work in the care space, that when somebody is a caregiver, you lose, because the overwhelm that comes from the logistics of it and from the management piece of it is that the tendency has been to pull in a project management lens
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when you have that viewpoint is that the person is no longer part of that consideration.
Right.
And so you can't change the person because they're a person and you don't want to, but how can you maximize the person to person interaction over this person is now an entity or a project that needs to be managed, because
Right.
then you lose the ability to stand in the kitchen and take a picture of them making cookies.
Yeah.
Because you're worried about the doctor's appointments and all of that stuff. And that's not to say that anyone that is doing that is doing it wrong. It's to say that's an example of why these products and programs and resources need to be made
Mm-hmm.
and made for everyone to see and to be able to access, so that it's not, people aren't internalizing that, saying like, oh, I should really spend more time with them. Because if you are trying to do all of these other things, like you're on your lunch break running to the store to try and clothe people for
Yeah.
people, not even yourself. Like you're not like, ooh, I think I'm going to try this top on. It was like,
Nope.
yeah, I need bigger onesies and I need smaller pants, and like I have
need
to
shirts
stick.
without buttons because they can't do buttons anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody could do buttons for a couple of years. I was button free.
A button free life. But that's the piece, right? Is like, how can you in those moments make it easier for you to be able to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to sit for 10 minutes and I'm going to eat my lunch during my lunch break,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like, I hope I don't have stuff on my face to go meet with this, this group meeting or something like that. I actually don't care because I'm so busy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you're building. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it and think about my story, because, sometimes you don't get to do that very often when you're in the process of building something. So this was wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. And please let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find the Carefullist and all of that. No shame, all plugs. Just one after another.
All right. So the website is www.carefullist, which is carefullist.com, and various social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can just look up the Carefullist and we will be there.
Yeah. And you also have a podcast where you talk to caregivers.
Correct. That is a video podcast on YouTube and audio on any platform where you like to get your podcasts.
Amazing. I will link everything in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.